Hello, everybody at Readercon. It is so nice to see you this Saturday afternoon. You are attending I'm in Infiltration Secrets for Writers. And today we're talking about how can characters get into spaces that they aren't supposed to be, whether physical or virtual, what makes these scenes feel plausible, and panelists, who I will just introduce in just a minute, will analyze the literary possibilities in various infiltration techniques, including those that rely on technical skills such as lockpicking or hacking, and those that rely on social engineering, and suggest useful reference works and successful fictional depictions. I want to tell you that we have wonderful, wonderful help with Rebecca and Luoma, and thank you both for helping on the panel. Rebecca is going to be pasting some links to various things into the Discord. So if you're listening on Zoom and not logged into the Discord, please go do that. That's going to be your way to ask us questions as well. Questions, even though you're typing them, still end with a question mark on the end of the question. And it is super important that you get those into Discord so that Rebecca can bring them over here so that we can see them. With that said, I would like to introduce this panel. It's an amazing panel. I'm so excited and honored to be moderating it. My name is Fran Wild. I am the two-time Nebula Award-winning author of Updraft and Riverland, and I have written over 50 short stories and a lot of nonfiction essays. I also work as an engineering writer, and I have a degree in information architecture and interaction design. I'd like to ask the panelists, Elizabeth Wine, Kate Kate, John Murphy, and Kestrel Verlanger to introduce themselves in order that I just called on you. So Elizabeth.
I'm going to correct you right away. And it's Elizabeth Wien. It's an Ellis Island special, so it's not what you expect it to be. I am kind of best known as the author of Codename Verity, which is a World War II pilot and spy story featuring a lot of flying and women in unusual roles. And since then, I've written many other books about women and flight. And part of the reason that I keep coming to cons is because in my other hat, I am a SIPWA member, and I have written 5 books that are set in Arthurian Ethiopia, if you can imagine such a thing. And I've also written a Star Wars novel, which is called Cobalt Squadron. My most recent book is The Enigma Game, which is appropriate, I think, for this panel. And that's YA, again, set on an airfield during World War II. And I'll stop there.
Okay, I did have a question to tack on to that after I messed up the last name of a literary hero because I've never heard it spoken aloud. I'm so sorry. What would you consider yourself as far as a heist or hacker or any combination of those? Would you consider yourself Team Leverage or Team Danny and Debbie Ocean?
Feel like this is a trick question. I don't know what that means.
Okay, who's your favorite Beatle? Who's your favorite hacker?
Who's my favorite hacker? Who's my favorite hacker? Yeah, my son. No, I'm old school. The lock picking type of hacker. And with that in mind, I also am going to go outside the genre and say that it's Lord Peter Wimsey, who probably doesn't even consider himself a hacker, but he really is.
I think that's a fantastic response and a great way to open the session. Kate.
Hi, I'm Kate Nephew. Fran, don't worry about it. There's no possible way you can know from looking at it that the P is silent. You just can't. I like caper stories. And I do not actively attempt to do any kind of hacks, but I enjoy reading about them. I enjoy thinking about them in terms of story mechanics. My favorite hacker, although I'm sure he would deny being called any such newfangled thing, is John Dortmunder of Donald Westlake's comic crime novels, which are truly brilliant on all levels from the sentence up. And so if you enjoy seeing things start to work like clockwork, have a wrench thrown in the gears, and then come back around, all with just razor sharp prose and observations, then you should read Westlake.
Thank you so much, Kate. John.
Hi, my name is John Murphy. I'm a Nebula-nominated author of a novel, most recently, Red Noise, which I've described as if Akira Kurosawa went on a Borderlands bend and then had to dash something off. Very few nuclear weapons, don't worry. Also, some detective stories, including my science fiction PI story, Claudius Rex, about an artificial intelligence investigator set in Boston shortly after the completion of the Green Line extension. Outside of literary works, I dabble a little bit in lockpicking. And by day, I am on the defensive side in network security, working on network tooling and helping people find hackers.
We are so glad to have you on this panel. And I believe that you participated in the grand Readercon tradition of suggesting this panel and then finding yourself on the panel.
I did, but last minute.
You kind of hacked your way in.
Exactly, the successful infiltration.
Kestrel.
Hi, I had never considered myself to be a hacker. Well, first I should say I am a disability and technology advocate, and I have a degree from MIT. Before that, I went to UMass Boston, and I had never considered myself to be a hacker until I had a lot of professors and administrators who kept telling me that I didn't belong in their classes. And so I started to figure out how to hack and socially engineer my way into being allowed to take the classes that I needed to graduate. Also, there was a time that I hacked the elevators because they kept breaking, which it turns out when you repeatedly punch the floor buttons, it would crash the computer in the elevator. And I figured out how to fix them. It involved using the emergency button. And for all the times that the alarm went off, no one ever came to investigate why that was. So let's see, my favorite hackers are Hardison and Parker from Leverage, but also Whistler from the movie Sneakers. And that is because that character is based on a real life blind hacker named Whistler, who actually was a phone freak, so before computers. But really, my role model is Miles Vorkosigan, the most excellent social engineer, who once played not only himself, but his alter ego, Admiral Naismith, at the same party.
Thank you so much for that. I'm so glad you all are here. I have a couple questions to get us started, and then we'll start fielding some questions from the audience as well. One of my favorite Readercon traditions is audience participation. So I'm really looking forward to seeing your questions in the Discord. If you need the link to the Discord, I believe that is available on the Readercon homepage or comes with your registration packet. So everybody has talked a little bit about your favorite literary thief or your favorite literary hacker, and we've gotten already into the different ways that people infiltrate different places that perhaps they're not supposed to be. I would love to kick this off with your pet peeve hack or your pet peeve infiltration. What feels the most unbelievable of anything that you have read or seen? Because one of the things that we're going to talk about in this panel is believability and ways in your craft that you can structure your writing to make things believable. My example for my biggest pet peeve hack is actually from the original Independence Day, where Jeff Goldblum's character uploads a virus from his 1995 8-megabyte laptop into an alien fleet without any problems or Wi-Fi. Kestrel, do you have a favorite pet peeve hack?
Yes, but first I just want to say what drives me crazy about that exact incident is my housemates and I can't even get our Mac and Windows machines to talk to each other. And like, you know, alien and human tech can talk to each other in like 3 seconds.
Right. It's
The
amazing.
one that I guess drives me crazy is how everybody learns to do some things in 2 minutes. And in reality, studying how things like lock picking and, you know, casing a joint, planning a heist, even planning a hack, months, and, you know, really complicated jobs might even take a year to plan. You know, really complicated magic tricks might take a year or more. So research, reconnaissance, practice, all these things are really, really time consuming. They're arts. They're not just, I practice it for 5 minutes in a montage, you know.
Thank you so much for that. John.
I have a lot.
Mike.
But the thing that always drives me bonkers is getting through the room full of lasers. And part of that is the whole thing is silly too, but a lot of it is the thief is playing by their rules, and that's not how it goes. It's like you fill a room full of lasers, you find another way. You don't go in and out. You find the different affordances that they didn't think about. So that one always drives me nuts because it's always a failure of imagination on everybody's part.
But what are you going to do with the bodysuit that costume got you so that you could go through the room full of lasers?
Go to a Halloween party. You'll be very popular.
All right. Kate, you're coming at this from a very literary point of view. So I'd love to hear your take on your favorite hack or your favorite pet peeve hack.
I'm not really sure I have one. I tend, when I'm reading and thinking about stories, I'm usually thinking more about, let me rephrase. Like when I'm reading a mystery, I'm usually not trying to figure out who did it. So I'm usually not thinking of it on that level. I'm usually thinking more about it from a story structure perspective, like how far am I in the story? Should I be, how big another shoe am I expecting to drop? And I can't say I have any pet peeves exactly in that respect, but so, you know, for me, in a way, this is just kind of a question that's kind of sideways just to the way I happen to think about it. I apologize that that's not particularly enlightening. Sorry.
It's mostly what disrupts believability, even in an emotional, you know, in an emotional scene. And we can come back to that, definitely. Elizabeth.
Well, I was actually following on from that and from what Kate said, and also from your comment that it's what disrupts believability. What I was thinking is my sort of, you know, pet peeve is when somebody saves the day by jumping into the pilot's seat and flies the plane. And this, of course, is related to my own knowledge of a very limited knowledge of, you know, how planes work. And it always drives me nuts. And I mean, sometimes it can be very entertaining to watch as well, because you sit there and you go, oh yeah, right, like that would happen. One of the example that I was actually going to come up with was not flying planes, but dismantling bombs. Another thing. This is recorded, right? I was a big fan as a young person of Danger UXB, and because there's quite a bit of focus on the flying bombs that the Germans used during World War II and Rose Under Fire, I put a little bit of research into that as well. And I came across recently, you know, somebody saying, okay, here's this unexploded bomb. We're going to neutralize it by dumping it in the ocean. And that's not what neutralizes an unexploded German bomb. If it was that easy, people would just spray water on it. And that kind of thing, when it turns up in what's otherwise supposed to be, a good piece of reading or a good story, just throws me right out of it. So yeah, it's always the person who sort of like jumps in a plane knowing nothing about flying and takes off and lands safely. That always drives me nuts.
Do you feel, as someone who has studied flying for fun and profit, do you feel like you could jump in a plane and save the day?
Well, I know now that if there's no better pilot on the plane, that air traffic control could probably talk me down safely. I do feel that is a possibility, but I wouldn't want to have to do it. I wouldn't trust me, but I do feel a little bit safer, I guess.
Before we go any further, just one question, because of something that John brought up. How many lock pickers do we have on this panel? Raise your hand.
I mean, I'm not like a professional lock picker, but I actually used to pride myself on being able to break into various houses, particularly my own. I had this conversation with somebody yesterday, and I have picked locks and taken them apart successfully. So yeah, me.
Okay. And John?
Yep. I was just saying, I actually found my picks this morning and was playing around with them. Again, I'm not any kind of professional, but I actually learned at DEF CON, where they had a room full of lock picks and practice locks, and training how to get tamper with tamper evidence seals and all sorts of fun.
2 follow-up questions to that follow-up question. When writing a lockpicking scene or reading one, what would add to the believability of the scene for you if you were reading it?
I think, well, cursing.
I prefer to think of it as using your power word.
Okay, John, please continue.
If it's like an ordinary lock, just mentioning putting tension on the lock, it is right away. It's like, okay, this person at least has some background in it and has some idea of how it works. So you're never just putting rarely just putting one thing into the lock there and twiddling it around. So
right.
That's
this is kind of where like I was thinking of literary hacks as meaning how you actually write this scene if you don't know anything about it. And for something like that, I think less is more. So if you really don't know anything about it, for heaven's sake, don't give details. The cursing will keep the reader's mind on, sort of the tension and the emotion of what's going on in the scene, and take the expert's mind off of the fact that you don't know anything about what you're doing.
So go for the emotional side, not the technical side.
Yeah.
Okay.
But also, as someone who spent like the last month and a half to 2 months researching many of these subjects, there is at this point very little excuse for not doing your research. There are so many tutorials and so many books, and just like YouTube videos that do really close up and recommend books. And the DEF CON site is, has like professionals, and there's just so much out there. And these are professional security people, so there's just, so little excuse for like just a very quick superficial search can find you so many resources.
Okay. And I would
go ahead, please.
I'm going to stop interrupting now, but I would add to that giving your characters all the tools they actually need. And by that, I'm not talking about doing your research and getting someone to check it, but setting up the situation so that they can succeed if you want them to succeed really, really helps. And, giving them the adequate lighting, giving them something's happened with the security at the front desk, just sort of having all those things come into play, so that with you as the author, as God, putting together a situation that will kind of take away some of the pressure. I mean, again, the emotional pressure is going to be there, but
Yeah,
you can
I had
you
something.
can fix the situation a little bit for them.
Okay, Kate.
Yeah, on locks and lock picking specifically and world building, I think it would be like if you're writing a story set in our worlds, you know, there's definitely a lot of information out there. I personally fall asleep to the lockpicking lawyer on YouTube because it's a very soothing voice, and it's like talking about something that, you know, is sort of engaging but not really. But if you're thinking about, one of the things that I've learned from that is that there are a lot of very cheap products that have known security flaws, but they've just been put out there to be cheap. And I think it would be very interesting from a world building point of view if you're, you know, set in something that's not our world, you know, what kind of secure locks and other security devices are out there. You know, do people not make things with known bypasses for cultural or other reasons? And so you can think, so there's that. And then there's also the question of, if there's a really good lock on the store, but there's also a big window next to it, you know, do you need to pick this lock at all, which is really applicable anywhere. And so those are two of the sort of things that listening to professionals can make you aware of, is sort of systemic flaws in existing things, and also just an awareness of, you know, the goals of protection and other ways, as John said, other ways around the room with the lasers.
Yeah.
Also, what would it say about your character? Which one would they choose if there's a window or there's a lock?
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, while you were talking, I was reminded, I can't remember which movie it was, but they're sitting there fiddling with a lock in a hurry, and you can see that they're on the inside of the door where the hinge pins are exposed.
Right. Right.
So actually, in Rose Under Fire, they have to they have to get out of a locked room, and I'm like, oh my god, how are they going to pick this lock? And they send one of the characters out a window. They kind of like, it's a high transom window, and they lift her up, and she gets out, and she comes around, and the key is in the door.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, and I mean, that's exactly what I was talking about in terms of setting it up for them. You know, so they are locked in, but there had to be a way for them to get out without picking the lock.
Can we talk, because we've sort of leaned highly technical, and I would love to talk a little bit about sort of what is the appeal for lots of different infiltration literature and stories. And quite often with heist stories especially, there's some particular appeal. But I think that, Kate, you mentioned a phrase that I really want to highlight when we were in the green room, which was improvisational intelligence. So can you start us on this talk, on this part of the conversation?
Sure. I actually mentioned two phrases. One was competence porn, which I believe was coined by John Rogers, who co-created the TV show Leverage, which most people who are interested in this topic are familiar with. I have not watched the new show yet, but I'm very much looking forward to having the time. So for me, you know, the appeal, one of the appeals of heist and caper stories is people who are good at what they do, and they make a good plan, and then something goes wrong, and then you get to see them being good at solving the new problems. And I think this is a very common appeal. Like for me, in some senses, most pro sports is an exercise in watching people work together well, team sports, that is, people work together well. But you know, and I think maybe Kestrel mentioned this, about this also ties into the getting the team together. You know, there's a lot of appeal to stories about people who ideally like each other and work well together, and, you know, or come to work well together and like each other. And so you can build a lot of emotional arcs and story beats into that process as well. So it's sort of, you can have it bring a lot with it if you like.
Great. Thank you. Kestrel, do you want to follow Kate?
Yeah, I'm going to recommend another, an earlier movie called Sneakers, which has a brilliant cast. It came out in like 1998, and it's about what's called a red team, which is a team of people that are hired to break in order to test a company or an agency's security vulnerabilities. And this is something that white hat hackers are typically do at this point. And it's based on the idea of a military red team versus a blue team, which is a team that takes the defensive aspect. But Sneakers is a great movie. It has Robert Redford, Sidney Poitier, Dan Aykroyd, and again features Whistler, this blind hacker character that I love. But
who's a real figure.
Yeah, it's just, and again, it's I think that possibly Leverage might have had some inspiration from it, because again, you have this team, it's very witty, and they rely on each other's skill set, and each of them has a very particular specialization. Oh, and I totally forget where I was going with this, except to say what we haven't really talked about yet is, and I think it connects to this idea of improvisation, is competence improvisation, is social engineering. Because what happens is all plans will fall apart at some point, no matter, excuse me, no matter how great a plan it is, and how great your skill set is, and how you react to that, how you improvise is I think one of the things that keeps bringing us back to, you know, what appeals to us about hackers and thieves and heist movies and all these is that moment when, you know, things go down and you get to see how the person reacts. I think that's something that appeals to all of us. You know, what happens when your plan fails? How do you react? How do you burst through? How do you break through that?
Great, thank you. John, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I'm a big fan of the Arsène Lupin stories, and the more recent show, which is really good. I haven't finished the last episode though, so but it's one of the things that I like about it is that Lupin is super confident, even beating Herlock Sholmes. But also, like, the plan, the author recognizes that half of the fun is trying to guess the plan, and that once you know what the whole plan is, it loses its fun. And so that's when things go wrong, right? When you find out what it is and everything goes off the rails, and you see how that combination of meticulous planning and improvisational talent come into play.
Elizabeth.
Well, I thought that since I started with Lord Peter Wimsey, I should maybe recommend Dorothy Sayers' books, really as a kind of how-to guide. Not necessarily in terms of hacking, although I do have a friend who basically taught herself to break in to locked doors by reading Dorothy Sayers. Okay, so not impossible, but like one of her books is like a field guide to how to do field work, you know, how to kind of infiltrate a organization that you know nothing about. And one of her
Remember which one is that?
Oh gosh, which one is it? It's the, I think.
Do you mean Murder Must Advertise?
I believe it is. Is it the one where Miss Clemson has to go and
Oh no, that's Strong Poison.
Cloud of
Strong
Witness.
Poison.
I can't remember. I get them all so mixed up, except for Gaudy Night. So just read them all.
Okay.
Because each one kind of like focuses on a different thing. And to be fair, I've read some in recent years, reread them, and she's a product of her time. And some of what she writes is kind of offensive. But there are nuggets to be taken away. And she really does, I think, do a good job of showing you not only kind of how to do different things, but also a bit about craft. And the one that she wrote, and you can help me out here again, the one that she co-wrote with the other guy,
Is it in the
the
teeth of the
documents in the
evidence?
case, the documents
Oh,
in the
yeah.
case. And I can't remember who was her co-writer on that. But that is a novel that's completely put together with found documents. So newspaper articles, case notes, letters, all lined up. And this was actually kind of what inspired me when I was writing Codename Verity, was how clever this was and how she managed to get character across in these very arbitrary, non-lying primary sources, so what you, the reader, have to kind of pull all this together. So I think that Sayers and her body of work is actually really good for teaching yourself about craft, and also incidentally about how to punt correctly.
Fantastic. We do have a number of questions from the audience, but I did want to talk a little bit about social and emotional hacking, because I think that's something that we haven't really touched on yet. So just very briefly, if you can raise the idea of infiltrating on an emotional level and what relevance that has for this panel in particular. There are many, many different directions this question can take. So John, I'm going to ask you first.
Sure. So I actually attended a talk a couple of years back about somebody who was working as a penetration tester and wanted to share his favorite technique, which was to be a Lyft driver or an Uber driver. And he would hang out near the company that he wanted to infiltrate and just pick people up on their way to the airport, and they would just talk. And he said that a lot of this was, people get bored and they talk to drivers because they figure they'll never see them again. It's just a random person. But they also kind of, they pick up names, they pick up titles, a little bit of gossip sometimes. And they get to the point where they can come across as somebody who's kind of in the inn, somebody who belongs. And that's a lot of that process of just not getting kicked out.
Great, thank you. Kate.
I was just thinking, there is the blog Ask a Manager is great, just if you just like advice or how people interact at all. But she had a number of comments recently of people who are like, yeah, I just showed up one day and was like, I'm supposed to be here, and just insisted I'm supposed to be here enough that they just got jobs. I was telling everybody in the green room beforehand that I was taking a nap this morning. And as I was falling asleep, I sat up and sent myself an email in all caps that just said fake dating. Because my original fiction brain has not come back from the wars. I've only been reading fanfic pretty much all this year. And the fandom I'm in has a lot of fake dating AUs. And I was thinking how similar that was excuse me, in a lot of ways to a con story or a caper story, where you have to convince somebody over an extended period of time that you are what you're not. Only in fake dating, there's two of you at least who are trying to convince other people of this, and there's probably more kissing than usual in a caper. And I was falling asleep, so this may have been more amusing than it excuse me, that it really warranted. But I think it's another example of how the social questions of deception and learning about people can be interwoven with a lot of different kind of stories. You can have basically rom-coms, you can have spy thrillers, you can use these skills for all kinds of stories.
Yes, thank you so much for saying that. Elizabeth, and then we're going to go to questions after Kestrel speaks.
So while you were talking, Kate, I was kind of reminded of how there was some weird Facebook feature a while back where they sort of guessed what your job was, what your job was. And I, sort of based on your profile and what you've been saying to people and stuff. And they came back and they thought that I was an international government employee. And I was like, yes, not only have I fooled Facebook, but they think I'm a spy. Oh my gosh. What I was gonna say here was that kind of the opposite, infiltration techniques in terms of how to drag the reader in. My very first novel, The Winter Prince, is written in the second person. And although it's not something that I did on purpose, I found that some readers feel very implicated in the plot because they feel like they're being addressed as well, really the villain of the story. So you can actually use narrative technique. And again, these found documents, epistolary novels, also make you feel like you're reading a real thing. So those are only really two examples, but it seems like it can go both ways.
Definitely. And I think something that I said in the green room, your books in particular often have your characters sort of engaging in reverse hacks where they have what they need and they just need to get it out into the world.
Right.
And I think that's a really interesting thing to think about too, when we sort of box ourselves towards what is hacking, what is infiltration. It does go in the reverse as well. Kestrel, do you want to take us home before I go to questions?
Sure. There's this one of my favorite Leverage episodes where Parker the Thief is freaking out over something, and she's asking the covert ops guy for advice, and he says, "Take your weakness and turn it into a strength." And so I'm short, I'm blind, I'm female. I can't really blend in. I can't sneak. But my strength is that I've gotten really used to just walking up to people and talking to them and putting them at ease. And people even will come up to me and, ask me like, do you want to use the staff elevator? Do you need the staff? Do you want to like go sit over here in the VIP section for the concert? And, it's like they're inviting me to like come into like the secured back, part of the offices or the business or whatever. And I'm totally not intimidating to them, and they tell me all kinds of stuff about family and their kids and their job and everything. And so this is one of the reasons why Miles Vorkosigan is one of the characters that I really identify with. He's he sticks out in his culture, and he's had to learn how to really use that to take on all these different roles to get people to work with him, to get them to do what he wants. And again, a great social engineer in his own culture.
My grandmother at 95 was doing a lot of traveling in airports, and she's always said, take a cane with you. Take a cane with you. You will get in all the places and they'll take care of you.
Okay, so as a cane user for disability reasons, that's a tough one, and it's a tough one to hear. Sort of, people using the bias and the cultural bias for hacking reasons when some people really need it. So
well, she needed it too.
Yeah.
To be fair.
Okay. I just needed to sort of.
Fair enough. Absolutely fair enough. Thank you for calling me out on that.
So we have questions, and the first one, I'm sorry, I can't see who asked these. So I'm just going to say the question from the Discord is, have you been the victim of a social engineering hack, and did you realize it was happening to you? And I have to say, just to jump the line a little bit, yesterday I got an email from Instagram wanting me to know that I had been approved, and all I had to do was send my driver's license and several pictures of myself and an example of my signature to the Instagram team. And when I checked the email, it was iamahacker.com.ru. And I was like, okay, that's I'm not going to be doing that. So how about you guys?
So if I have been the victim of a successful hack, I don't know. But I do periodically get calls from the wonderful folks at Windows who have found a virus on my computer.
All the time.
And I don't really have the time to do this anymore, but I used to make a game of how long I could keep them on the line from my own memory of the Windows interface. I don't actually have a Windows machine. I have a Mac. but I kind of make a game of it and eventually just get bored and do things like, oh gosh, hang on, there's somebody at the door, and put them on mute and go. And I've gotten them up to about 10 minutes or something before they start swearing at me and hang up.
Hey, John. Kestrel.
My answer was going to be the same as John's. If it's really successful social engineering, you might never really know. But I have begun lately to fight back against the Mass Commission for the Blind, which is in this battle to get a lot of personal data from its consumers, including sending out a computer survey, an online survey, supposedly to learn more about their consumers. And the very first question was, what is your original gender as listed on your birth certificate? And I went into this panic of thinking that this couldn't possibly be a real survey. It must be some kind of phishing attack. And so I had to call up MCD and say, is this legit? Because I can't believe it's a real survey. And they're like, no, it's real.
We all just made the most horrified faces.
Yeah.
So now I'm having this ongoing battle with MCV, the commissioner of MCV, over his various disrespectful, attacks on getting our personal information and filing it into a government database and calling it like getting to know our consumers.
I'm so sorry that is happening. That it is a good reminder, though, that infiltration and hacks don't necessarily just come from the outsider community. There is also quite often commercial ones that are happening all the time. Kate.
Yeah, I got nothing.
Okay, Elizabeth.
Sorry, I don't really have anything either. I kind of like very early on made it my personal duty to, whenever I got a chain letter in email, to sort of write back to the person and say, look, this is fake. And I have really tried very hard to recognize these things when they come at me. I have not, knock on wood, fingers crossed, been the victim of anything yet. And I honestly don't know what I would do if I was. At this point, it would be very hard. I wrote a Star Wars novel, and I got sent like pictures of some photographs of the set, so I could work with it. And I had I knew the plot of The Last Jedi before it came out, and I spent that entire year living in fear that I was gonna, lose my laptop and just, I don't know, my life was gonna be over. So I honestly don't know how I would actually react if I was the victim of some kind of identity theft or social hacking.
Okay. All right, thank you. We have about 5 more minutes, and I'm going to try and get to 2 questions in that time. And after that, I would invite you to please, panelists, go to the Discord room to pick up on any of the discussion that is left. Kestrel, I can jump on a call with you and we can read back, and I can help you get the text if that's useful. So 2 questions. One is, what do the writers on the panel do to learn more practical techniques about infiltration in any instance? Elizabeth, I'm going to start with you.
More practical techniques. Well, I'm going to actually talk about what somebody else did. And I think, Kestrel, you made the suggestion. There's so many online how-to videos. And I do know someone who basically learned everything there was to know about rifles in the Ukraine in the 1930s. And there's a ton of really, really useful stuff out there. And it's one of the best things for the internet is just an incredible, incredible resource. But one thing I would add maybe that isn't quite as obvious is that you can use Wikipedia in other languages. And this is actually very, very useful for finding out things that happen in France or in Germany or whatever, because they have different things listed. And Google Translate is so good now that you can very easily read what's going on there. So don't forget that you don't have to be stuck with stuff that's in English. Use Google in other languages, actually, because you will find your different search results come up if you search Google, stick your French search term in Google France or whatever. So, don't get stuck, just kind of like thinking, oh, I just have to use what's available to me because I see it on my screen.
Awesome. Thank you. Kestrel, your Dreamwidth page contains so many great resources. I want to make sure that the viewers of this go there and take a look. That is Kestrel, KESTRELL.dreamwidth.org. And it's also listed in the discourse page. Can you talk a little bit about how you might go about finding resources in the future, or how you went and found a lot of these resources in the past couple of months?
Yeah, so John also mentioned the DEF CON website. They archive all their talks and their slides and all kinds of media. They have a YouTube page. There's also the Black Hat Conference, which is sort of the more professional counterpart that happens the week before. Now, both of those conferences just ended last week. So there's all kinds of, new material that just happened. If you look at Wired and the tags for security, there's always lots of stuff. Amazingly, Forbes has a lot of really amazing stuff on security. And the name that it would absolutely, as far as hacking and red team and pen testing, lockpicking is, look for this guy named Deviant Ollam. The last name is Ollam. He's written a couple books on lockpicking, and he has all kinds of really amazing stuff. He's also on DEF CON. But again, all this stuff is pretty fascinating.
Great, thank you. We have just a couple minutes left. I want to emphasize to everyone that to continue this conversation, please go to Hallway 1 on the Discord, Hallway 1. So with just a few minutes left, Kate and John, you guys are going to get the last word before we end. I want to thank everybody on this panel and everybody in the audience for being amazing. Kate, go to it.
With what?
Research methodology for
you don't want me to answer this question. You want John to.
Okay, John.
Okay. Well, actually, I was going to steal your example. The Lockpicking Lawyers YouTube channel is amazing. You reminded me of that. For lockpicking specifically, Tool, TOOL. I forget what it stands for, but it has a lot of resources for it. And the reminder to please, if you are trying this stuff out at home, don't actually endanger yourself or others. It's not quite worth it. Last minute pitch for A Burglar's Guide to the City by Jeff Manoff was a great read for getting into that mindset.
And Tool is where I got my lockpick set from.
Yeah, same here.
Okay, so we had a lot of lockpicking. This is obviously a topic that could go for a long time. I would invite you to join us in Hallway 1 for more conversation on this, but also please visit the websites of our panelists. They are amazing. Their books and their work is amazing. Please take a long moment to say thank you to our Readercon volunteer staff who has made this possible this week. Thank you all so very much. Panelists, thank you. This has been brilliant talking to you today.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.